Again, I'm Kathy Murray. I am co-founder of Tech Up for Women. And we do these Tuesday Tech Up talks frequently, and they're always fun. So relax, enjoy, get to know each other via the chat, and also ask your questions that there'll be time for during the program. Today, we have three professionals leading an important charge. Their important charge is to help brands advertise more responsibly and effectively in the era of fake news that we all are very familiar with. It's a fascinating topic. Many of you in our community heard them speak at our main stage at our November Tech Up conference just last November. And many of you expressed an interest in learning more after the presentation. Today, we have a moderator who is a great friend of Tech Up for Women, Lana McGilvray, and she's with Purpose Worldwide. And she will introduce the speakers and moderate the panel. So Lana, over to you.
Kathy, thank you so much. It's so great to be back. And I actually haven't heard you start with the values of Tech Up for Women. So I really appreciate that. It's a really great way to start a Tuesday. And it's an honor to be back here. And I'm so glad to be here today with Adam and Vanessa. And just also wanted to thank everybody for watching today. I know how busy it's felt, at least to me, since 2022 began. So thank you for either taking time out of your day or whatever you might be doing and joining us. Before I introduce the panelists today, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on myself for those who haven't been on some of the webinars and the Tech Up talks that I've done in the past. I'm Lana McGilvray, and I'm the founder and CEO of Purpose Worldwide. We're a strategic marketing and communications firm. We're really focused on helping organizations like the two you're going to hear from today that are making our world a better place to drive their purpose, their awareness, and their growth. And without further ado, today we have with us Adam Katz. He is the Chief Revenue Officer and GM of Sightly. And we also have Vanessa Otero. She's the founder and CEO of Adfontes Media. Adam and Vanessa, before we dive into today's media topic, I'd love you to share just a little bit about yourselves and your organizations with the audience, and then we can go straight into the meat of the topic today. Vanessa?
All right. Hi. Yes. Nice to be with all of you today. My name is Vanessa Otero. I'm the founder and CEO of Adfontes Media, and I founded the company in early 2018. We're a startup. But before that, I had created the original media bias chart. So if you've seen that online, you might have seen various different versions, but it's basically an infographic, a two-dimensional infographic that rates news sources on a vertical scale for reliability and a left to right scale for political bias. And I created that original version in 2016, and it sort of took over my life in a good way for the next couple of years. And then I started a company around it because there just seemed to be a lot of demand for what we're providing, which is news ratings, which really hadn't existed before. So today we rate the news for reliability and bias, and specifically we rate news and news-like information along gradients for reliability and left to right political bias. So the vast amount of content that falls into these categories of news and news-like content, I mean, there's really so much of it. People get their information not just from like the nightly news broadcast or like or cable news or just traditional news sources. They get from blogs, opinion shows, podcasts, and not only this kind of content. I mean, it really varies. There's some stuff that's great. There's some stuff that's okay. There's some stuff that's misinformation, inaccurate, fake news, whatever you want to call it. And there's stuff that's left and right bias, but there's also stuff that's pretty extremely so. And of course, these cause problems societally. Like, I don't think I need to convince anybody that misinformation and polarization are huge societal problems, but the opportunity there in business that I saw is that this is a huge business problem too, specifically for advertisers. And we're going to talk about that more today. But we're addressing a particular market gap. Like there isn't any technology, or hasn't been, for advertisers to be able to tell whether they're advertising on misinformation or extreme polarizing content. And while there's technology for, making sure that they don't advertise next to violent content or sexually explicit content or content that references drugs, there really hasn't been that same kind of technology or data available to tell what the difference is between something that's just, opinion or something that's misleading, because those are big gray areas. So that's what my company does.
And hey, Pam there, who's chatting with us now. Thank you, Vanessa. So if I'm hearing you correctly, your company, your platform, your technology, your data is helping people rate media bias or provide that intelligence. Is that correct?
Yeah, we provide that media bias intelligence to companies.
Great. And what type of companies are those? Are those brands or agencies? What types of companies?
Yeah, in the advertising industry, they're brands, agencies, companies that service brands and agencies. There are a ton of players in the data infrastructure of the ad tech ecosystem. So they're from multi-billion-dollar companies to mid-size and to small brands and agencies. All of them need this kind of data, and we're filling that gap.
Got it. Well, thank you. And Adam, actually, I guess talking about all those companies in between the advertisers and the publishers, if you could share a little bit about Sightly and yourself, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be back. Been looking forward to this for a while. Actually, it was like, Lana, when are we going to be back with Tech Up for Women? So excited to be here. So my name's Adam Katz. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer and General Manager at Sightly. I've been at the company for a little over 7 years now. In a world where a lot of people are moving around and bouncing around companies, I have no interest in doing that. I've been at Sightly since the early days because of the unbelievable culture and values and perspectives of the way our company thinks. And that plays really, really well into today's conversation about Sightly. What Sightly does is we allow brands to centralize their opinions, perspectives, and values in one place to make quick business decisions around intelligence and activation. Right. So what that means to me in a very, very simple way is every single brand, human, person, everyone has different perspectives, like values and opinions on the way they look at information and the way that they adjust what's going on in today's market. And information has never been more in our face or moving faster than it is today. You consume it in thousands and thousands and thousands of ways every day. And we want to allow brands to understand who they are and allow them to actually think in the same speed of today's information, which is a really big challenge, right? And the way that we feel that you can do that is by centralizing that information in one place. People do social listening, they do survey data, they do consumer intelligence, they look at so much different data, and then they work with companies like Lana, or they work with agencies, or they work with marketers, and they struggle to bring together one way that everyone thinks across an organization from their values and perspectives. So we want to help centralize that to push into market. And then we also want to allow brands to take their opinions and perspectives and not be shut out if they think something's an opportunity when to somebody else it's a risk. So it's a big challenge, and we've been taking it on now, and it's powered by what's called our brand mentality platform, which we'll talk a little bit about today. But I'm super excited to be here. And just so you guys know, I am a client of Vanessa, so I am a little biased on her platform. So if you look at me on her bias chart, I'm very biased. But they've been amazing to work with if you guys get a chance to check them out.
Got it. Thanks so much, Adam. And we have a nice little chat going on the side. So it's so great to see some of the folks from Sightly on. Pam is in talent development, which we'll get into a little bit later today. And it looks like we also have Anna, I'm probably butchering your name the same way people do with mine, but it's good to see somebody here on the PR and comm side too. Well, let's get into the topic today. So the topic actually was how data is helping to drive media responsibility and an effectiveness. But, on that point too, it's been a noisy couple of weeks in terms of fake news, and when you mentioned brand mentality and your concept of that, I wonder how that's going to play into some of the things that we've all been experiencing as a culture. So I want to throw this one over to Vanessa first, but I guess kind of with the broad label of fake news, why is fake news such a challenge today in the advertising world? And from your perspective, how did it get that big?
Well, I think that one of the problems is that real news versus fake news is actually a false binary. It's not that simple. I mean, yeah, sure, there are real fake news websites out there. I mean, a couple of like real headlines that like we've come across are like Richard Branson, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos are creating an intergalactic confederation, and they're flying to Jupiter for a meeting. Like clearly that's fake news. Another one said like Lady Gaga sold her soul to the Illuminati, and like not only is that like no, these are real fake news websites, right? But those are sort of easy to detect, and they're sort of like so outrageous and silly that you can just like avoid them. But that's not what people are talking about when we're talking about like issues of like misleading content or inaccurate content, because today there are really complex issues out there with real debate, like efficacy of vaccines and treatments for COVID, or crime and policing, or what's taught in schools about race. I mean, these are really complex topics, and there are differences between sources that report on these issues responsibly and ones that really do not, like ones that take these issues and try to oversimplify them or twist them to take advantage in one way or another, whether that's for political purposes or just for attention, right? And there are gradients of this. Like real to fake is not a binary, it's a gradient. On our how we rate news for reliability, it's like, okay, original fact reporting, analysis, which is still reliable, opinion, which is still reliable, but it's opinion, which is different from fact reporting. And then you've got things that are like their opinion, but then they're starting to get really problematic, like super polarizing or insulting, calling people names, really trying to create divisiveness, right? So that's still in the opinion section, but it's getting into this like this area where brands are probably uncomfortable. And then below that, there are things that are misleading. Below that, there are things that are inaccurate. And the problem for advertisers is that they can't possibly be familiar with all of the content they advertise on, because there's just so much content out there. And because they're unaware, I mean, brands want to advertise. I mean, advertisers want reach. They want to get their, they want performance. They want to be able to get their message out in front of customers on things that are relevant. But because they can't be familiar with all the content, it's really hard to make decisions on what's okay to advertise on and what's not. And this can cause real PR nightmares for not just like brands and like the advertisers themselves, but even the platforms themselves. Like this week, the last few weeks, just look at Spotify. I mean, they've really struggled. I mean, Joe Rogan's podcast is their premier like piece of content. They paid $100 million for exclusive distribution rights. And when they first started, like they didn't sign him on because he was a notorious spreader of misinformation. But there have been a few different shows where like what we do is we go and look at individual episodes and individual articles in order to rate news for reliability and bias. Like that's all we do. So because we do that, we have eyes on all these things. We can say, all right, this particular episode, this had these misleading statements or these inaccurate statements. And even on the same piece of content, even on the same podcast, like the whole Joe Rogan podcast, he has other episodes that are perfectly fine, that are not right biased or left biased. Like they're just sort of all over the place. It's just so much to keep track of. That one show has 1,800 episodes and they're each 3 hours long. And I mean,
I'm going to jump in there for a second. Yeah. Because what I heard today is that the CEO of Spotify had jumped in and that they had finally started to remove things, but the technology that they'd been using had missed that. So in terms of the scale of this problem, how big is the problem?
I mean, it's enormous because like they purportedly removed his episode with Alex Jones a few months ago. It was still on there last week, right? You could go and play it, and it's not just his show. Like that's getting a lot of attention right now, but you can go on Spotify right now and find podcasts where people are denying that the Holocaust happened. Like that's terrible, right? And advertisers should want to know that. Like they should want to know when there's like clearly false, clearly misleading, or and or super polarizing content on there. And the thing is, you need eyes on these things. Like it's not a problem that can be solved 100% with technology. So we use a human plus technology
Did she freeze?
approach because able to make good decisions on this.
Got it. Well, thank you too. And I know on the other side too, from the publishing perspective, I don't know if you see data, but publishers do need to get things opened. So I'm not sure that necessarily incents the most neutral news, if you will. So
no, it's a terrible incentives. Like get eyeballs, get clicks, get views. You know what's one of the easiest ways to do that? Outrage content, clickbait content.
Yeah. So Adam, what's a brand to do? What is your whole take on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that Vanessa froze at the big moment. So is someone watching us here?
Gremlins.
It's her. So
Oh no, when did I freeze?
froze in your biggest moment. So I don't know. Maybe someone's listening to you here.
Breaking the internet.
You broke the internet. But anyway, so I think the issue for me, right, is that we obviously all have our own personal perspectives, and then we all have our own brand perspective, and we all have our own individual beliefs and political views and what we care about most, right? So I think one of the biggest challenges with what we're talking about, which is fake news, is the original question, is the eye of the beholder is where a lot of this information is a struggle for people, right? They have their own. I joke all the time, actually, Vanessa, when I talk to her about like specific people are looking for things to prove their narrative, right? So ultimately, that's how publishers are acting, right? Because they're trying to bring in their consumer base to read what's most important to them. And as we all know, controversy and like negative things always sell the most. So I think one of the problems right now is that, money is preceding what's real and what's not out there. So I think it's a challenge. I think the way to fix it personally, I don't think it's fixable. I know that's always a controversial comment, especially for my friend Vanessa, but I don't think it's fully fixable. What I think it is that people have the right to know what they're looking at, right? I'm not a doctor. So if I make a comment about something that's what a doctor should comment on, someone should know that that's coming from somebody who doesn't have that degree, somebody who's is not qualified to say that, right? I don't think that we're going to be able to stop people talking about things or looking at things that, are out there. Now, in terms of the Spotify issue, it's a wild one, right? Like you have obviously they're making, their biggest money off this podcast. That throws a curveball for them all the time, right? It's also, Rogan's, vouching for the fact he brought people on both sides. And, there's just so many parts to this, but I think one of the biggest parts is how interesting it is to watch the evolution of the story, right? So to me, like it starts out one place, then it goes to another place. Then The Rock is supporting Joe Rogan. Then 5 seconds later, he reads something and he's not supporting them anymore, right? So ultimately, I think the way we solve the challenge, Lana, is we try to give brands the ability to understand what they're getting into, and to give them the ability to understand their threshold when they're getting into a conversation, and to give them the ability to dictate what matters to them and what doesn't. And Vanessa's, company helps us drastically make sure that we don't provide any of those websites like Vanessa was talking about for a brand to even think about, right? Like, so there's things that are so off the spectrum that we all should be against, right? And then there's that next phase that I think we're starting to really look at as an organization and as a culture. And I think ultimately it's a challenge for brands to figure out what they're comfortable with, right? So in negativity, a lot of positivity comes all the time, right? And I think the challenge 2 years ago, when we originally started to see a lot of the movements that were going on and COVID, our industry blanket blocked all of it. And it was extremely frustrating to me, right? Because I think that there's a lot of times where negative happens and there's so much positive coming from it. Right. And so
the inclusion list are so blunt, aren't they?
So I think that's the challenge right now, is giving brands back the ability to think about things that way. Right. Like, and then there's also individuals that brands love who have an opinion that they don't love. And they now have to figure out how to navigate that. And our technology gives them the ability to navigate that. So I think it's pretty critical to stop looking at everything as one central part and be able to break down things in the lanes that they are. So I think that that's where we stand.
Well, it's so interesting because you said these news cycles change too. So, The Rock is with Joe one day, he's against him the next day. So between the two solutions that both your companies offer, do I have the opportunity, if I'm P&G or another big advertiser, to kind of throttle things or change things? It just seems like there's a lot of nuances.
Absolutely. And it's been fun. It's fun to talk with Vanessa because we work together. So it's a lot of fun to think about the path that the two of us have been on when we talk about these topics, right? So we obviously come to them from a different perspective, but we come to settle on the same place, that consumers deserve to know what they're getting into all the time, right? So ultimately, when you look at anything that's going on, Lana, even to the point that you're asking about, right? P&G wants to go after consumers to drive an outcome. There's no doubt about that. But if you look at you look at my Dove bottle now, when I'm in the shower, on the back of the bottle, they're talking about who they are, right? So brands more than ever are trying to push out there who they are, what they're about. And if you look at the Gen Z audience specifically, they make decisions based on a brand's values or purpose more than ever before. And I have found myself, because I work with so many Gen Z employees at Sightly, thinking differently because of them. I have found myself listening to so many people at Sightly telling me different perspectives that I've started to think differently. So we learn all the time from everyone around us. So P&G, what they could do with our platform is have their perspective. They could put it into our platform in a very simple way. But just like any human or anyone that learns, our platform helps them learn over time and allows them to adjust to where their perspective is all the time. So I think it's a really powerful way to think about things versus thinking that your perspective won't change, that it's not going to change, especially as information is changing every single day. I was giving the example of The Rock. He went from I'm in to I'm out, right? Over in 48 hours. So this is the world we're now living in. So information's moving that fast. And what Vanessa does with us in an amazing way is she looks at that information to make sure that when we digest it, we're not populating any information that is so off the spectrum that a brand's comfortable with, but then brands give us their perspective and she can help consolidate that based on the perspective that they have.
Got it. So Vanessa, how do you deal, when you were talking about the natural language processing and the humans in the loop and your technology, it strikes me, you've got Washington Post is very different than the Onion. And I would think that brands want to advertise, in certain cases next to both of them, maybe neither of them. How does your technology work and help us understand that content?
I mean, we're doing fundamentally content analysis on these two very hard to automate measures. So, there's with natural language processing, machine learning, AI around, detecting what's in content. There are certain limitations, right? It's easy to detect things like sentiment or topics. You can even detect the level to which something is opinionated, but it's much harder to detect whether it's left or right. It's orders of magnitude harder to detect whether something's true or not, because truth, that's a big gradient, right? And you have to have a lot of knowledge about everything else that's going on. And you can't just it's really hard to just scan text and be this is true. It's the technology's not there yet. So the way that one of the reasons it's not there yet is because there aren't these large manual training data sets of news content that's been rated by humans to on these particular measures of reliability and bias. So that's how we're building our technology solutions, by sitting there and literally listening to podcasts and TV shows and manually rating them and listening and reading articles, tens of thousands of them at this point, with our team of 35 analysts who are politically balanced, left, right, center, and diverse across personal characteristics. But, going back to how we solve this problem, and, and what Adam said about the problem, the fake news not ultimately being solvable. I do agree, right? But I'm an optimist, and I think we can make things a lot better, because, I see junk news as really similar to junk food, right? So we have junk news in our ecosystem. Like most of our news is junk news. Like, so when junk food first sprang onto the scene in terms of fast food and processed food, people were like, this is great, it solves a problem, we can have like unlimited calories for super cheap. And that was great until it caused a bunch of health problems for society. And there was a while where we didn't even have like nutrition labels, and we didn't even know what was in the food, and we just ate it, right? But then we were like, oh, we need to kind of figure out what is in here before we like put it in our bodies, and then we can make better decisions. So, nutrition labels came out in the 70s, right? Today, 50 years later, we have much better options because it's a thing we measured in the first place. Is it completely solved? No. Can people eat donuts and fries all day? Yes. Can they, drink and smoke and take drugs and like do all these things that are like way worse for you, right? They can make that choice, but we have better choices today because of that.
Buyer beware kind of proposition then.
Exactly. Like Adam said, people need to know what they're getting into so that they can make the choice. And so what we're like is like a nutrition label for the content that you're putting into your brain. Like before you put it in there, you know what you're walking into. The brand knows what they're walking into. So yeah, maybe we don't solve the problem. Maybe some people love to advertise on the super opinionated clickbait, misinformation, whatever, but a lot of people don't. And a lot of people would make better choices if they knew what was in there. So, the brands who say, this is what we want for ourselves, we can say, here's the information about the content, and then they can align themselves like through Adam's platform.
Got it. So I guess for everybody in the audience, I'd be curious if you had a nutrition label for content, would you use it? Would you reduce the fatty news, I guess, bad news?
I haven't been able to do that since COVID. I put on a lot of weight. So I don't, well, hopefully people can, but Vanessa, just so you know, I completely agree with everything you're saying. It's all about choice, right? I think that's where this comes down to. If brands have choice, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable.
Good. Angela would use the content label. Go, Angela. Okay. So actually, speaking of people like Angela and talent, I know people work for your companies, and I am curious, and we've got another yes on the content label. How's talent coming into your companies? It's not the easiest time to retain talent right now. We've got the Great Resignation. Talk to us about the people at your companies.
Yeah, I think I'll take that first, just because Vanessa's answer should be even more compelling than me as a founder. But in terms of looking at our company, I think it's important to understand that we're not seeing the Great Resignation at Sightly. So it's been inspiring that we're not. I think the reason that we're not is because we focus on, we listen to ourselves. We look at people's opinions, values, and perspective in our own company the way we would look at it in the world, right? A lot of our employees have brought up amazing things over the years on diversity, on women empowerment, all these different things. And every time somebody brings something up, our leadership team takes action, right? So we listen and we learn, right? So I think that that's critical. I also think it's critical that, obviously we're speaking today, for the Tech Up for Women. I personally have told you this, Lana, over the years, I grew up around a lot of women leaders. So I thought that it was pretty common in my upbringing. So I thought that all women belong in leadership growing up, right? So to me, it was not a unique thing. So when I got into my career here at Sightly, and including my whole career, I've always thought it was normal, right? So I've helped promote, so many women throughout the organization, right? But ultimately, a few years ago, I started to really look into this when I started to read a lot of the stats around women investing and how much money that women actually get invested in them every year. And I started to realize that it actually was a challenge. So I've invested a lot more in learning about it. And I've done a pretty good job of actually listening to the rest of the company, understanding the way they feel about it, and understanding how to make those people better. So I think in terms of our company, I think the way we think about things is that it's all about learning from the people around you, getting better. But on top of that, thankfully, we have not had the Great Resignation. In terms of hiring, where the challenge is that there's so many great opportunities out there, right? So I think in the interview process, my recommendation to people, including in our own company and external, is to be a lot more real in the interview process, right? I know it's a funny word, but like, I think you got to get to real, like have more conversations about your life, who you are, how you think about your day to day. Are you a parent? Do you love your kid? Like, how do you hang out with them? Because right now we're all living in each other's houses, right? You're in my house right now, right? So ultimately you guys are going to see Sophie run by, or you're going to see, different lives than you were used to in a work. People used to have their work life and their home life. They're kind of connected today. So I think it's pretty critical in the interview process to be very real with the people you're going to work with, have them meet with people in multiple departments, not just one. And I think it's very important to peel back the onion and tell them how that's really going to be in the company versus when they walk in on day one and it's not what they were sold. So I think that it all starts up front. And I think our company, that's kind of our process, from myself to the company to the way we all think.
Thanks, Adam. It's actually so inspiring too. I think what both your companies are doing is so inspiring. So Vanessa, where are you finding all these fact fighters, and what skills do they have to have when they come to Fontes Media?
We're a small company. We're really lucky. As we get bigger, I want to be like Sightly. I want our company culture to be like Sightly. I mean, they're a great role model in that aspect because people love working there. I've had a chance to hang out with a lot of members of the Sightly team, and you can tell they feel that way about the company. We don't have the Great Resignation either. We're lucky in the recruiting department because people care a lot about this problem. They really care a lot about misinformation and polarization. And so we've got, our staff is small. We have 6 full-time employees, a couple of part-time employees, and then we have a lot of analysts. We have about 35 analysts that are part-time and are contractors. And so when we put out calls for that, we've got like a stack of analyst applications like this high, virtually, it's online. People like to, people want to come work for us. So I feel really fortunate.
Still printing resumes, Vanessa?
No, it's a virtual one. Yeah. But yeah, we will be hiring in like sales roles and other like development roles because we're raising more funding right now in another round, and but we're very much a startup. So I want to just encourage women in this audience, especially because it's tech up for women. You have the opportunity to work at startups, work at young companies, start your own startups, and I really want to encourage that. I mean, Adam was talking about the stats in capital invested in women, and I'm really passionate about this. I'm really passionate about closing gender disparity gaps, and there are a couple of great articles. I live in Colorado, right? And so one article came out a few weeks ago that said Colorado is the best state for women entrepreneurs. And there was $91 million invested in Colorado women-led startups across 23 deals in 2021, and that was the best year ever. And then a few weeks later, another article came out and said Colorado in general is just crushing it. It's a great startup environment, and something like $6 billion was raised across 454 deals or something like that. And I was like, hey, wait a minute. So I started doing the math between the two articles, and it turned out in the best state, Colorado, 5.3% of the deals were to women-led startups and 1.4% of the money. So there's a big gap there. And I am an optimist. I'm a solutions-oriented person. And we just, I really want to encourage everyone to help from where they are. So what that means for women who are thinking about starting startups, high growth ones that want to attract venture capital, make the leap, like do it. Look for mentors in the space. Like there are not that many people who are doing this, but the ones that are really willing to mentor others. Investors, male, female, any gender, needs to be able to look at when they're investing, reframe their mental models of what it looks like for a successful company, because women-led startups often have different they have different markets. They present themselves differently than male founders, but that doesn't mean that their company's not the next billion-dollar company.
They do well. Your average female startup that's run by a woman over 40 does extremely well. So the metrics are not matching up with the money that's coming in.
Absolutely. And then having male allies and investors to move the needle, that's what we need.
Thank you. I think everybody agrees with that. And I can tell how passionate that you both are. We're coming up. Let me ask one more question, but then let's go to the Q&A. So in terms of just kind of this whole conversation, if there's one thing that the audience remembers from you and kind of how you're feeling about the topic today, what would it be, Adam?
I'm so conflicted on that answer because I'm thinking like women in leadership and then our company. So the way I would answer it is that, blend those, right? That's how I'm thinking coming out of this. So our company can give brands the ability to push out their message around like-minded thinkers, right? So a great example of this is, we always tell this in most meetings just because it tells the story really well. The Bumble CEO is one of the great women tech leaders of all time. So if you want to put advertising out there, surround her when she's speaking about her company, right? Think about advertising around what you're trying to also solve, because ultimately it will drive a better outcome. It'll drive more loyalty from your customers, but also it'll solve something that you really care about. So coming out of this, I'll leave people as you actually could solve the problem in both ways as you're doing what you're doing in market. So I think that's kind of what has been coming to my head throughout this conversation.
Thank you, Adam. Vanessa?
Yeah, I think I keep going back to this, false binary of like real news, fake news. I think there's also like a false choice between, doing the right thing and doing well as a company. And we see more and more examples of where companies can do both, right? And the advertising around, misinformation, fake news, or polarizing content, companies can make better choices and positively impact society. So it works with both when you're talking about really good news sources and really terrible news sources, right? So there are companies who they just want to advertise everywhere and like get as many, eyeballs on their ads as possible. They just want to, avoid the worst content and not get in trouble. And we can help them do that, right? Because if they that means their money is going to go towards more quality media, and it's not going to contribute to they're not going to get in trouble, and two, they're not going to be contributing to like a drain on society, really, is how I see these news sources like on the the bottom corners of our chart. But when it comes to like actually proactively funding good journalism, there are great local news sources and great like national news sources that are really high quality premium ad content that performs really well. But there are some major brands that, because they're so afraid of any kind of political backlash or being associated with something like slightly negative, that they just pull out of news completely. And by getting back into good news properties, they can actually help fund journalism and like help fund like this fourth estate of pillar of democracy that's really fundamental. So they can companies can do good and do well. And the platforms like ours and Slightly's can help them execute on that.
Thank you. So for everybody on the phone, we've got just a few more minutes. I know that Kathy had been saving some questions, so I'll read those in just a minute or two, but don't be shy. If you have more questions that you want to chat to all of us, we can go ahead and read them. Let me see what Kathy has up here. So looks like the first one is, Vanessa and Adam, for those listening that want to learn more about your companies, who can they reach out to?
Me, my contact information. Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, find me on email. We've grown this company just by me meeting people on the internet because of my chart. So every great connection has come through that. So please feel free to reach out.
Okay, hopefully there's not 12,000 on the phone today.
I remember a lot of people on the internet. Trust me, if everyone has something to say about this topic.
They could reach out to us through Sightly on LinkedIn, any of our first names at sightly.com within the organization. they can go to the website to see job openings. You could also reach out to me, adam@sightly.com. Really, anyone at the company is a great conduit to getting to speak to any of us. I think so. That's one of the things that, I was talking about earlier, that our team is our biggest selling point to getting people into the organization. So I think anyone that you reach out to would be more than happy to talk to anyone. And then if we don't have a great position, I think one of the great parts about all of us at Sightly is we'll look to help you elsewhere. So I think that we'd love to talk to anyone that's out there.
Got it. Thank you. So another one. This is a skills question. So this is Tech Up for Women. Are there any like particularly special tech skills that you're looking for on engineering side or on the tech side? Adam, I'll throw that one at you first. I've been starting with Vanessa the whole time today.
It's all good. Smarter people first. So in terms of, I tell everyone today to learn data science. Because to me, the ability to ingest information and make it faster and more scalable is where everything seems to be going. So every time I see my little cousin who's like 13, I'm like, go be a data scientist. So I think that's obviously a core place that you could put your skills. But I also think let's not forget street smarts and common sense, right? So you're asking about tech. The greatest people in our company, even the tech leaders, that some of them are on this right now, the best ones have common sense and street smarts too. So I think we need to combine common sense and technology more than ever before. So my recommendation would be to have fun and be great at tech, right? It's like learn how to be around people and how to navigate organizations equally as much as you need to understand technology.
Great idea.
Yeah,
Vanessa?
I think no matter what field you go into, if you develop a high competency in a really specific area, you can find a great job, make a great career out of a lot of different things, right? I was a patent attorney. And so people paid me a lot of money as a patent attorney because I knew a lot about, various different types of technology and how to translate them into patents at the patent office. Is a very, very specific skill. So like the more specific you get, the more you can like build a career on that. But if you really want to like open up your options and get broad, you combine that really specific skill set. And I view like being a patent attorney is being very much like a developer or like an accountant. Like somebody's paying you to do something that they don't want to do, they don't want to learn to do, but you have like spent your career learning how to do that one very specific thing. But if you can combine it with sales skills, that really opens up a lot of doors because everything is sales. Entrepreneurship is sales. Your customer relations is sales. Business development and creating partnerships with people, managing people, all of it is like selling your ideas in some way or another. So, if you can, even if you don't think your job is like a sales role, getting some kind of training or even just reading books about one of the fundamental ones is how to win friends and influence people. Those kind of books
Not with fake
really
news.
help.
Okay.
What?
I said, but not with fake news.
Not with fake news. Yes. Yeah. I think Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, classic, right? Those kind of skills are like soft skills Adam was talking about. That's what I recommend.
Thank you. It looks like we have one last, and this one's for me. So what does my company do? My company actually looks for companies like Vanessa's and Adam's. We help them with their marketing and communications. We work with technology companies. That's how I first got involved with Tech Up for Women. I've been mentoring up and down. Actually, I got a lot of mentoring. We give a lot of mentoring my entire career, and it was really invaluable. So we work with technology companies. We also work with NGOs, and we work with some direct-to-consumer brands like Reach Mobile that have a purpose beyond profit. In their case, they donate money back to women and children that don't have communication. They believe it's a human right. With that, I wanted to thank Tech Up for Women and Vanessa and Adam for getting on with us again today, and Kathy for allowing us to take the mic, and for everybody listening. Really enjoyed it, and I hope you'll have us back.
And I'll take the mic back and just thank Adam and Lana and Vanessa for being with us today. And this is really fun. You didn't see my camera on, but my head's going, yes, yes, yes. So a lot of great content, and we're getting a lot of thanks in the chat. So have a great Tuesday, the rest of it wherever you are.